Hello, welcome back to the latest You Are My Boro with myself, Dom Shaw and Scott Wilson. And it's a lot more positive this week, or it should be a lot more positive, I would imagine, after a win last night, a much needed win over Sheffield United. You were there, Scott, so we'll have a reflect on that, obviously, and an early look ahead to the trip to Norwich at the weekend. Are we doing all right?
All good. Yeah, all good. Thanks, Tom. It felt like a big night last night. It did. It was one of those nights that had the potential to completely tip the other way, I think. And for the first half hour, it was very unclear which way it was going to go. But then, I think by the end, Boro fully deserved what they got. And obviously the way that it happened with Latte Lath and all of that, which I'm sure we'll get to, just made it feel like a big moment and a big night.
Do subscribe if you're watching along on YouTube and you haven't already. We obviously appreciate that, as we say every week. And if you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review on there. When you look back over the last year or so, Scott, every time Boro have really needed a win, Carrick and his side kind of have this handy knack, really, of finding a way. The obvious two games that spring to mind last night are the Southampton home game after the Sheffield Wednesday debacle, and then the Norwich home game after the Stoke defeat, when we were asking Carrick whether they're at risk of being sucked into a relegation battle. Last night felt quite significant. It felt like they needed a result, didn't it? And they found a way again.
Yeah, we were just saying that, funnily enough, in the kind of press room after the game, that is one happy knack that Boro have got under Carrick, that, as you rightly say, on the occasions when it's just felt like the pressure's ratcheting up a bit and everything's getting a bit crotchety and you just wonder where things are going, they've tended to pull out a result, and quite often a result that has led to a bit of a longer term turning round. And that's obviously the challenge now for Boro. Can they actually now go and build on this? It's by no means been a disastrous start of the season, but it's not been the start of the season that I think any of us would have wanted or envisaged. And yet they're still reasonably handily placed. And if they can now put together a sustained run of form over 3, 4, 5 games, they can still quite quickly get right back to where they need to be.
There's two ways of looking at it, isn't there? There's the where we should be if we hadn't thrown these daft points away, or look, we haven't hit top gear yet. We haven't really got going yet. We've thrown away some daft points. We're nowhere near what we could or should be, and yet we're 2 points off fourth, whatever it is. It just shows, I think, two things really, that the Boro will absolutely or can absolutely be in the mix this season, but also that, as we thought, as we suspected, that there isn't a kind of collection, a group of outstanding teams at the top of the championship this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like you say, the fact that Boro are absolutely still banging in around it when they've, what have they tossed away? 6 points, 8 points, 10 points, take your pick, really. But it's all very well saying it, and that's what we've been saying for the last couple of weeks, isn't it? That Boro have been saying all the right things, they've been hitting the right metrics, they've been doing this, that, and the other. You've got to win games of football, and that was the be-all and end-all last night. And like I say, it was by no means plain sailing. It wasn't Boro at their best by any stretch of the imagination, and there were times in that game, especially for a kind of 15-minute spell fairly early in the first half, where you were just thinking, this is going to be a really difficult night. There was nervousness, there was edginess, there was a reluctance to take any risks. I thought Boro were wanting to be really safe. And it was almost like when that Ayling goal line clearance came, what about midway through the first half, that almost seemed to flick a switch. That it was like, do you know what? Let's just have a bit more of a go here. And certainly in the last quarter of an hour of the first half, and to be fair to Boro, pretty much all the way through the second half, they were on the front foot more. They were more aggressive. They were more willing to take a risk. And like I say, by the time Latte Lath gets his goal, Boro are the better team.
Let's talk about Latte Lath then. It's a bold call. It's a big call to take him out the firing line, because for all Michael Carrick had played down the fact that he hadn't scored in 10 games or whatever, and talked about how he's still offering so much for the team, it's an indication, isn't it, that things aren't going as well as you'd hoped when you drop your striker.
Yeah, and Carrick came. He obviously did the TV interview before the game, and he came out after the game, and he said what you'd expect him to say, which was, it's not a big deal. It's just freshening it up. Players will come in and out all the way through the season. That's fine. But if you drop your star striker, the man who was carrying the team for big chunks of the second half of last season, the guy who you fought tooth and nail to keep at the club in the summer when we all know what happened on deadline day, if you're dropping him 2 months into the season, 3 months into the season, whatever, then that is a big call. There's no getting away from that. Now, it didn't work out in the sense that Conway didn't come in and get his goal. I thought Conway did okay. But it clearly did work out in terms of Latte Lath 3 minutes after coming on the bench, getting the goal. He ends the night with a massive smile on his face when it could have been very, very different. And, you know, you'd like to think this is now a chance for Latte Lath to kick on. That said, I think it's now really interesting who he picks up front at Norwich at the weekend. That's now a really big call again. You know, does he give Conway another go by saying, look, you know, I've put you in, the least you deserve really is a run in the side? Or do you say, okay, I've kind of made the point, but Latte Lath's still my man, he'll come back in? When really, you know, what message does that then send out to Conway if you're taking him back out after one game? I think that's a really interesting call. My gut feel is he'll probably give Conway another game up front.
Right.
But that's going off absolutely nothing. Obviously, with the game being on Sunday, Carrick's doing his press conference on Friday rather than today on Thursday. So I suspect we won't get any kind of indication from it anyway. We all know what it can be like there. But I think that's an interesting call. That said, though, like I say, what could have been a really difficult night from the Latte Lath point of view turned into a really good one.
Because if he does bring Latte Lath back in, well, then you've got the obvious question of, does Conway drop out or does he drop back into number 10? Then what happens with Finn Azaz, who makes the winner? McGree's on the left, makes a difference again. We've said a few times, I mean, McGree started 4 championship games now this season. Boro have won them all. Clearly, that's not all that's at play here. But there's no getting away from the fact that Boro are a better team when McGree's in the side. I
thought he was the one who made the biggest difference last night. And it's just because he's more direct than everybody else. This is going to sound ridiculously simplistic, and I'm sure that Michael Carrick and his coaching staff would dismiss this and laugh in a second. Most Boro players in that final third, when they get the ball 25, 30 yards out, in and around the edge of the box, they're looking to move it off. McGree looks to shoot. And that, it's as simple as that. But in that first half, when the crowd were getting a bit tetchy, it wasn't really working for Boro, there was a couple of moments where McGree got the ball on the edge of the box and had a shot. I think both of them got deflected behind for corners that then led to nothing. But I thought they were important moments because it just shifted the dial and got Boro onto much more of a front foot setting, looking to be proactive. And I think that's what McGree gives you. He's definitely more direct than all the other options in those kind of wide attacking positions. And I think that makes a difference, certainly for where Boro are at the minute, where, you know, it's not really clicking in the final third. They're not scoring a lot of goals. They're not creating a whole host of great chances. I think having someone like McGree in there is important. And then also, you know, he covers a lot of ground. He provides some protection for Borges. He knows that position out, inside out. He's more willing to do the dirty work probably than some of the other players who might play there. So it's a complete package. But I think it's his direct nature when he gets on the ball that really helped Boro last night.
And Azaz, a bit of a divisive figure with fans, really, which we've talked about. But it does look far more at home in that number 10 role, as we've discussed at length, and is involved in the match-winning moment.
Yeah, and again, you know, I don't think it was his best game last night necessarily. There were definitely periods of the game where he wasn't massively involved, but he's got that bit of quality in him, and that's ultimately what made the difference. Yes, it's a really good header from Latte Lath. He's got to angle himself to get it there, but it's an absolutely perfectly weighted, flighted cross from Azaz. The type of ball that Boro hadn't really been putting in before that point, and really haven't been putting in an awful lot all season. But Azaz has got that capability to drift around in that 10 role, get a bit of a pocket of space, and deliver with a bit of quality. And that made the difference.
At the back, is George Edmondson now above Matt Clark in the pecking order? Because when Edmondson got the nod ahead of Clark at Watford before the break, you're thinking, well, it's Clark's first game back in the squad after an injury. And then the Bristol City game, you're thinking, well, Carrick was delighted with a lot of what he saw for 70 minutes at Watford, so he's clearly not going to make changes. But Edmondson makes a mistake for the second goal against Bristol City, keeps his place in the team, keeps a clean sheet last night. And when you looked at the team for the first time last night, it's the first time where you look and think, yeah, is Edmondson now ahead of Clark in the pecking order? Clark now faces a real battle to get back in the team, because that's without Dale Fry back in action and with Darrell Lenihan still to come back.
Absolutely. I think the answer has to be yes, he is, because as you rightly say, Carrick has had opportunities now. But had he put Matt Clark back in last night after the defeat of the weekend, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid at all. I think most people would have thought, well, yeah, that's the obvious move. So I think the fact that he hasn't, and the fact that Edmondson played really well last night, I thought that, he's up against Kiefer Moore, who, all right, might not be the player that he quite once was, but he's still one of the biggest physical threats in the Championship, without a shadow of a doubt. And Moore barely had a chance last night, and that was largely because of the job Edmondson did on him. I thought Ealing had a good night at right back as well. I thought Boro defended well as a team. But I thought Edmondson, was one of the standouts, definitely. So I think he has to be there. And it's, it's not only the fact that Clark now looks like he's being shuffled down the pecking order a little bit. I mean, we've constantly been saying, when's Dale Fry going to be back? When's Darrell Lenihan going to be back? When are they going to be in the squad? How far off are they? Well, Carrick is not, I think we know that Carrick now is reluctant to throw players back in too quickly. So it's going to be a slow introduction anyway. But Dale Fry is going to have one hell of a battle to get near this starting lineup, because Carrick seems to be looking at Edmondson and Clark and thinking, yeah, they'll both do for me. So we keep saying, when's Dale Fry going to be back? It could be an awfully long time since we see Dale Fry in a starting lineup, because I think at the moment it is. It's Edmondson's shirt to lose.
What was Wilder like post match?
He was good. Yeah, I thought he was quite good. So obviously that's 2 defeats on the spin now for Sheffield United, and he was interestingly, he was kind of saying, look, we come to Boro here who have had 2 defeats on the spin. There's a bit of unrest, a little bit of grumbling, this, that, and the other. And he's like, that's what we'll be having now. I accept that. We've lost 2 on the spin. But then he kind of said, look, we've been on a really good run and we were getting a load of plaudits, but we're not the finished article by any stretch of the imagination. So, does it surprise me that we've lost a couple of games on the spin? Well, I'm not happy about it, but no, not really, because that's probably where we're at. And I think it's easy to lump Sheffield United in with Leeds and Burnley and Luton, obviously, to a lesser extent. They've had a much tougher start. But to lump in with the parachute payment clubs that you automatically assume will be up the top. Well, Sheffield United lost 20 players at the end of last season and brought in 14. Now, that's a massive, massive overhaul. So, I think he was basically just trying to say, we need to be aware of where we're at. And then he was asked about Boro and where do you see them? And he kind of said, Boro are at a further point along their journey than we are, really. Michael's had 2 years putting this team together. They've not had the level of upheaval we've had this summer. So, I think you've got to bear that in mind. But then he also kind of said, having said that, I do think these 2 teams will be 2 of the teams up there challenging come the end of the season. And I think you saw that from the game. And I think you probably did. It was a good championship game between 2 pretty well-matched teams with not an awful lot between them.
What sort of reaction did he get then from the fans, or was it a bit meh?
Very, very little until right at the end.
Right.
I think, to be fair, Boro fans had their own preoccupations because, for the first 20, 25 minutes, it was edgy. It was nervy. 3 minutes in, Seny Dieng does one of his rolls straight down the middle of the pitch that goes straight to a Sheffield United player, and there's kind of audible groans. And it was one of those nights that just had the potential. Now, to be fair to the Boro fans, once Boro started getting on the front foot and started becoming the dominant force, there was a real groundswell of support then and a bit of energy. And it felt like all the momentum was heading in that direction. But I think because of all of that, the Wilder thing was kind of forgotten about, really. And it was only really after the final whistle, when he went onto the pitch and went across with the Sheffield United players to the Sheffield United fans, that the Boro fans had a little bit of a pop. But other than that, yeah, it was relatively nondescript, really.
Norwich then at the weekend, and as we said at the start, Boro have had this handy knack really of finding a way to win games. What they've got to do now is string wins together.
Yeah.
When we spoke to George Edmondson earlier in the season, and he said something like, it's only a matter of time until we hammer a team. And the emphatic reaction I got from fans was, we don't want to hammer a team. We just want to string a run of wins together. We want to win consistently. Norwich away is a tough next game to build on that. But Boro have looked better. Boro have got better results so far this season against better teams. There's no getting away from that. And after winning at West Brom, I don't think they'll go to Norwich fearing anything at all, will they?
No, and that win against better teams thing, that's really true right through Carrick's reign, isn't it? Boro have looked better under Michael Carrick against the better teams in the division than they have in the so-called games that you would expect them to win, i.e. Bristol City at home. Although given the record against Bristol City, God knows why any Boro fan thinks they're going to beat Bristol City at home, but that's a whole different kettle of fish, isn't it? Norwich away is not easy. Norwich, they've been a bit up and down this season, but they've had some very good results and they've tended to be pretty decent at Carrow Road. That's a difficult game. Coventry at home, we're kind of back into Bristol City at home territory, where the way Coventry have been playing this season, you'd expect them to win. But Coventry and Mark Robbins has been a real bogey for Boro, and, for obvious reasons and the obvious matches I'm referring to. So, that's got potentially difficult. Listen, there's no gimmies there, but there's nothing that makes you think, oh my goodness me, how can Boro get something? It's just the test now, as you rightly say. Can they go and string a run of results and get 3 wins from 4 wins from 5? Because that's going to be the game changer in terms of lifting Boro from where they are now to genuinely in the top 6 and being properly right in amongst it. They just need that little run where, like I say, you pick up 10 points from 12, 9 from 12, 7 from 9, something like that. That's the kind of run we're talking about, isn't it? Well, they've got 3 from 3. Let's see where they can get to in the next couple of weeks.
And just finally, how was Carrick after the game last night then? Because I was over at Rockley for his pre-matcher on Tuesday. And regardless of whether you agree what he was saying, it was kind of as strong and as emphatic and as good, really, as what you see him in that pre-match press conference setting, which we've talked about before, haven't we, really? But Carrick's at his best when he's, not that his backs are against the wall, but that he's got to defend something, that he's got to kind of fight his corner a little bit. And that was exactly the case on Tuesday. He was talking then, it's 2 years today since Michael Carrick was appointed, and he was talking then about how he's as confident as ever that Boro are on the right track. He thinks Boro are playing a better football or a more complete side than they have been over the course of the last 2 years. What are your thoughts? And as we reflect on kind of like 100 games so far of Michael Carrick, 2 years in charge today, what are your thoughts on kind of where Boro are at under Carrick and what happens next?
Well, just on Carrick last night first, I think I absolutely, don't doubt that he believes all of that he was saying in the pre-matcher. But I think he knew it was a big night last night to get a result. And, having got that result, listen, if they'd got beat last night, I'm sure he would have come in and said, we carry on, it doesn't matter, we're not going to get... I think he knew it was a big night to get a result. And he was kind of willing to say that on the back of getting the result. In terms of where are Boro in the bigger scheme of things, well... you still look at this team and this squad and the way the league's panning out and everything we've talked about and think there is absolutely no reason why Boro shouldn't be genuine promotion contenders this season. I do think they've got a really talented, deep squad. I do think that Carrick knows what he wants to do with them. I think there are issues over, is there a plan B? Is there a willingness to adapt, to change, to be flexible? And I think that's probably a question we're going to be asking all the way through Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough reign because, clearly he is very, very reluctant to stray away from what his team are doing, the way that he sets them up, his tactics, all of that is pretty much set in stone. So I think that will always be a bit of an issue. But Is that going to prevent Boro from getting promotion? No, not necessarily. I don't think so. I look at this team and the way that they are and everything and think there is more than enough there for there to be a successful promotion push. And I think Michael Carrick is more than capable of overseeing that. That said, if I was to make one criticism, it would be that sometimes I'd just like to see a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of a willingness to try to do something different on the days when it's not really been happening for Boro.
And it's interesting, isn't it, just finally, because if you were to look at where Boro were on and off the pitch when Carrick was appointed, you'd say they've come on leaps and bounds since then in the 2 years. And then if you'd look back a year to where Boro were a year ago today, you'd say Boro are so much better placed than they were this time last year. I guess the other comparisons in between those times, so the second half of the 2022-23 season and the second half of the 23-24 season, that's when we've seen like the real promising signs of Carrick's Boro. And I still think that Carrick's best side was that team in the second half of his first season. That Akpom, Archer, Giles, Ramsey team, they were just so powerful and blowing teams away. This feels like a different team now. It feels like they've evolved and they play a different way. They're not the more patient rather than the powerful side that were blowing teams away there. It feels like they've come on and evolved.
It's probably more like the team that Carrick wants, because that is exactly what he wants, isn't it? He wants control of the ball. He wants patience. He wants to be possession-based. Now, I'm kind of like you. I don't think we've seen from this team yet that it's at the level that you were talking about in the back end of that season when Archer was running riot and Giles was tearing down the wing and Tuba was getting goals left, right and centre. But Carrick clearly thinks that he can get this team there. So,
that's what I was going to say. I think it's the potential of this team. I think that's what's kind of A, exciting and B, frustrating as to the underwhelming start to the season. It's what this squad could be capable of, what this team could be capable of. Look at that squad. I think it's as balanced and as strong and as deep as any squad in the Championship. And I think it's the potential of what they could become that's exciting in the second half of the season. Where do you think we'll be? Where when we're looking at 3 years of Carrick, 12 months down the line, well, the aim is obvious. Where do you think Boro will be?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, we've said a lot of the narrative around the Michael Carrick regime has been the way that he's fitted into the club and the way that he's enabled the club to make the off-field changes that they've clearly wanted to make. And all of a sudden, recruitment looks in a completely different place. There's harmony when there was division in the past. Everybody seems to be all of that stuff that we've talked about. Now, what I would say is, it's easy to say that when Carrick's in place. I still think the big question and the interesting point for this whole Boro project, if you like, will be what happens when Carrick leaves. Because generally, when it's gone wrong for Boro, pre-Carrick, it's when everything's had to be turned upside down when a manager's gone. And the very strong narrative is that won't happen now. Well, fine, but the proof of that pudding will be in the eating. And all the positives that we've talked about that have gone on around Carrick, and they are positives, don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying how well things have progressed, but a lot of them have been built around Carrick, and we are still yet to see whether they actually are as strong in terms of their foundations and everything remaining in place if and when Carrick does move on somewhere else, because that's going to be the acid test, isn't it? It's all very well saying it, everything's sweetness and light, we know what we're doing, we've got plans, we've got progression plans, all of this. That's fine until you actually have to start enacting them and maybe things don't quite work out the way you thought they were going to. I think that's going to be interesting.
Norwich then on Sunday, Boro hoping to build on the win over Sheffield United last night. Just very quickly, predictions for Carrow Road?
2-2.
Yeah, I'll go 1-1. And which I think's a fine result. I think a draw's a decent result.
I do. I do.
United.
On the back of having got that win, I think that will be okay. I think it's a test for Boro, don't get me wrong. But I think what Norwich will do is allow Boro to play, which again feeds into what we've been saying, that I think that suits Boro. So I'm expecting it to be pretty open. Yeah, I'll go 2-2.
Yeah, I'll go 1-1. And I think 4 points out of 6 is fine after the Bristol City game. But you then look at the Coventry home game and think, well, that's when you've got to win. That's when you.
Yeah, that becomes the next game where it's
like,
like,
the Norwich draws a decent. The Norwich draws a decent point if you follow that up with a win over Coventry. Let's see. Safe travels if you're heading down to Carrow Road this weekend. And do
That's
subscribe.
you, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going down Saturday night. I did Norwich in a day last year. Was it last year or the year before? I did it in a day.
That's a long trek.
Yeah, didn't fancy it.
It's one of them where you get to where you're turning off the year one and you think, I'm nearly there. You're not.
It's more farm shop than service station, isn't it?
Once you get farm shop than service station, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Get stuck behind a tractor and you add another hour.
Yeah. So now I'm going down Saturday. I'll probably meet up with the BBC Tees lads will be out and around Saturday night. So
well, there you go. Anyone who's down there.
I was just about to say, come over, say hello, and I'll have a fruit cider if you're buying. Perfect. Yeah. So do subscribe, as we said at the start. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Leave any comments if there's anything you want us to discuss. Rate and review on your podcast platforms as well, and we'll be back next week to reflect on that game at Norwich. Take care.